She opened the chest thinking it was empty, but froze when she saw Nick Barnes inside. The inheritance nobody expected. The old Victorian mansion loomed against the gray November sky, its windows dark and unwelcoming. Sarah Mitchell stood at the iron gates, her hands trembling as she held the letter from the estate attorney. Her great-aunt Eleanor had passed away 3 weeks ago, and Sarah had barely known her. They had met only twice, once when Sarah was 5 years old, and again at a family reunion when she was 16. Yet somehow, Eleanor had left her entire estate to Sarah, bypassing her own children and grandchildren. Sarah had spent the last 2 weeks dealing with lawyers, insurance companies, and the logistics of inheriting a property she had never set foot in. Now, finally, she had the keys in her pocket and the house was hers. The attorney had mentioned that the mansion contained decades of accumulated possessions, and that Sarah should take her time going through everything. There was no rush, he had said. The property was paid for, and there were no outstanding debts. As Sarah pushed open the heavy front door, a cloud of dust particles danced in the shaft of afternoon light that streamed through the entrance. The air smelled of old wood, mothballs, and something else, something indefinably ancient and forgotten. The foyer was lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow her as she stepped inside. Sarah had decided to start her exploration in the attic. The attorney had mentioned that Eleanor had been a collector and that much of her collection was stored in the upper reaches of the house. Sarah climbed the narrow stairs, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the empty mansion. The attic was vast, stretching the entire length of the house, filled with trunks, boxes, old furniture, and countless items that had accumulated over more than a century. It took Sarah 3 days of exploration to begin to understand the scope of Eleanor's collection. There were old photographs, letters, journals, clothing from different eras, and countless objects whose purpose Sarah could only guess at. Eleanor had been a meticulous collector, and many items were carefully labeled and organized, though the organization system made sense only to Eleanor herself. On the 4th day, while moving a stack of old suitcases, Sarah discovered something unusual, a large wooden chest, ornately carved with intricate designs. It was partially hidden behind a wardrobe, and it took considerable effort to pull it out into the light. The chest was beautiful, clearly valuable, and unlike anything else in the attic. It appeared to be from the Victorian era, crafted from mahogany with brass fittings that had tarnished with age. Sarah's heart raced as she examined the chest. It was locked, but the key hung from a small hook attached to the inside of the wardrobe. She had found it almost by accident, and now she held it in her hand, wondering what treasures Eleanor had deemed important enough to lock away. The key turned smoothly in the lock, as if it had been used recently, though Sarah knew that was impossible. Eleanor had been in a nursing home for the last 5 years of her life, unable to climb the stairs to the attic. The lid creaked open, and Sarah peered inside, expecting to find jewelry, documents, or perhaps letters of sentimental value. What she found instead made her blood run cold. Inside the chest, curled up in a fetal position, was a man. Sarah's scream echoed through the empty mansion, a sound of pure terror that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. She stumbled backward, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The man was pale, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. For a moment, Sarah thought he was dead, that she had discovered a corpse hidden away in her great-aunt's attic. But then the man's eyes opened. They were blue, startlingly blue, and filled with confusion and fear. The man gasped, his body convulsing as he struggled to unfold himself from the cramped space of the chest. He was thin, almost skeletal, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. His hair was long and matted, and his face was covered with a thick beard. "Water," he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "Please, water." Sarah stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Was this a burglar? A vagrant who had broken into the house? Or something far more sinister? A victim of some crime? Hidden away by Eleanor for reasons Sarah could not begin to fathom? "Who are you?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice shaking. "What are you doing in my chest?" The man struggled to sit up, his movements slow and painful. "My name is Nick Barnes," he said, his voice growing slightly stronger. "And I've been waiting for someone to open this chest for a very long time." Subscribe to our channel right now to follow this incredible mystery. Click the bell icon to get notifications when we release the next chapter. You won't believe what happens next in Sarah's shocking discovery. Subscribe today and join thousands of viewers uncovering this unbelievable story. Sarah's mind reeled as she processed the man's words. Nick Barnes. The name meant nothing to her, yet this stranger claimed to have been waiting in the chest for a long time. The implications were staggering and deeply disturbing. How long had he been in there? Days? Weeks? And more importantly, why? Sarah forced herself to think rationally. The man was clearly in distress, dehydrated, and weak. Whatever the explanation for his presence in the chest, he needed immediate help. She ran downstairs to the kitchen and filled a glass with water, then returned to the attic. Nick was still sitting beside the chest, his breathing labored, his body trembling. "Drink this," Sarah said, handing him the glass. She kept her distance, still uncertain whether to trust him. Nick drank the water in one long gulp, then held out the glass for more. Sarah refilled it twice before his thirst seemed to be partially satisfied. As he drank, she studied him more carefully. He was perhaps in his 50s, though his appearance made it difficult to judge his age accurately. His clothes were expensive, or had been once, a silk shirt and tailored pants, now filthy and torn. His watch, still on his wrist, was a Rolex, the kind that cost more than Sarah's car. "I need to call the police," Sarah said, reaching for her phone. "No." Nick's voice was suddenly sharp, his hand reaching out to grab her wrist. "Please, you can't call the police. Not yet. You have to listen to me first." Sarah pulled her hand away, her fear returning in full force. "Let go of me. I'm calling 911. My name is Nick Barnes," he said quickly, his words tumbling over each other. "I'm a federal agent. I was working undercover, investigating a major crime organization. Eleanor, your great-aunt, she helped me. She hid me in this chest to protect me from people who wanted me dead." Sarah stared at him, trying to determine if he was telling the truth or if she was dealing with a delusional man who had somehow broken into her house. "That's insane," she said. "Why would my great-aunt hide a federal agent in a chest in her attic?" "Because the people I was investigating found out about my cover," Nick explained, his voice becoming more urgent. "They were going to kill me. Eleanor was a friend, an old friend from my past. I came to her for help, and she agreed to hide me until it was safe." "For how long?" Sarah asked. "How long have you been in that chest?" Nick's expression became haunted. "I don't know exactly. Time loses meaning in there. I've been in and out of consciousness. Eleanor would come up and give me water, food, medication to help me sleep. She said it was the only way to keep me alive, to keep me hidden. She said that when she died, whoever inherited the house would find me and help me." Sarah's mind was spinning. The story was too bizarre to be true, yet there was something in Nick's eyes that suggested he believed every word he was saying. And there was the matter of Eleanor's will. Why would she leave her entire estate to Sarah, a great niece she barely knew, unless there was something important she wanted Sarah to do? "I need proof," Sarah said. "If you're really a federal agent, you must have some kind of identification." Nick reached into his pocket and pulled out a wallet. Inside was a badge and an ID card identifying him as Special Agent Nicholas Barnes of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The ID looked authentic, though Sarah had no way of knowing if it was real or an elaborate forgery. "This could be fake," Sarah said, though her conviction was wavering. "It's not," Nick said, "and I can prove it. Call the FBI field office in New York. Ask for Special Agent Marcus Chun. Tell him that Nick Barnes is alive and that I need extraction. He'll know what to do." Sarah hesitated. Every instinct told her that this situation was dangerous, that she should call the police immediately and let them sort out the truth. But something held her back. Perhaps it was the desperation in Nick's eyes, or perhaps it was the strange coincidence of Eleanor's will and this man's appearance. She decided to take a middle path. "I'm going to call the FBI," she said, "but I'm also going to call the local police. If you're telling the truth, you have nothing to worry about." Nick nodded slowly. "Okay, that's fair. But please, when you call, ask for Marcus Chun specifically, and tell him that the operation is still active, that the targets are still out there. He'll understand." Sarah went downstairs and made the calls. The local police dispatcher was skeptical about her story, but they agreed to send officers to the house. The FBI field office was more responsive when she mentioned the name Marcus Chun and the phrase, "Operation still active." They said they would send agents immediately. While Sarah waited for the authorities to arrive, she returned to the attic and sat across from Nick, keeping a safe distance. She had 1,000 questions, but she decided to wait until the authorities arrived before asking them. Nick seemed to understand her caution. He sat quietly, occasionally drinking water, his eyes closed as if he were trying to conserve his strength. When the police arrived first, Sarah explained the situation to them. The officers were skeptical, but they agreed to secure the scene and wait for the FBI agents. It took another hour for the federal agents to arrive, but when they did, they moved with the efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing. One of the agents, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an authoritative demeanor, approached Nick immediately. "Agent Barnes," she said, "I'm Special Agent Lisa Morrison. We've been looking for you for a very long time." Nick's face crumpled with emotion. "Is Marcus here?" he asked. "He's on his way," Agent Morrison said. "He's been coordinating the investigation from the field office. We need to get you to a hospital immediately. You're severely dehydrated and malnourished." As the paramedics arrived and began examining Nick, Sarah found herself being questioned by Agent Morrison. The agent wanted to know everything about Eleanor, about the house, about how Sarah had found Nick. Sarah answered as best she could, though she realized how little she actually knew about her great-aunt. Leave a comment below and tell us what you think is really going on. Is Nick telling the truth, or is there something more sinister happening? Share your theories and predictions in the comments section. We love reading your thoughts and will respond to as many comments as we can. Nick was taken to the hospital, where he spent 3 days undergoing medical evaluation and treatment. Sarah was not allowed to see him during this time, but Agent Morrison kept her informed of his condition. Nick was severely malnourished and dehydrated, but otherwise in surprisingly good health given his ordeal. The doctors estimated that he had been in the chest for approximately 4 months, though Nick's own sense of time was unreliable due to the medication Eleanor had been giving him. During this time, Sarah learned more about the investigation that had led to Nick's hiding. According to Agent Morrison, Nick had been working undercover for 5 years, infiltrating a major international crime organization involved in money laundering, human trafficking, and arms dealing. He had gotten close to the organization's leadership, close enough to gather evidence that would lead to multiple arrests and convictions. But someone had discovered his true identity. The organization had put out a contract on his life, and Nick had barely escaped with his life. He had gone to Eleanor, who had been his mentor years earlier when he was first starting his career in law enforcement. Eleanor had agreed to hide him, understanding that the safest place for Nick was somewhere the criminals would never think to look, in the attic of an old woman's house in a small town upstate. The plan had been for Nick to stay hidden for a few months until the immediate threat had passed and the organization's leadership had been arrested. But Eleanor had suffered a stroke, and then her health had declined rapidly. She had been moved to a nursing home, and she had been unable to visit Nick or provide him with the care he needed. She had left detailed instructions with her lawyer about what to do with the house and its contents, but she had died before she could explain the situation to anyone. Sarah was brought to the FBI field office in New York to give a formal statement. It was there that she finally met Marcus Chun, the agent Nick had mentioned. Marcus was in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes. He thanked Sarah profusely for finding Nick and for calling the FBI. "Your great-aunt was a remarkable woman," Marcus told Sarah. "She risked a great deal to help Agent Barnes. The organization he was investigating is extremely dangerous. If they had found him, they would have killed him without hesitation." "Why didn't Eleanor tell anyone?" Sarah asked. "Why keep it such a secret?" "Because the fewer people who knew, the safer Nick was," Marcus explained. Eleanor understood that. She was willing to bear the burden of that secret alone, to protect a man she cared about. Sarah found herself thinking about Eleanor in a new light. The woman she had barely known had been a hero in her own way, willing to sacrifice her comfort and her health to protect someone in danger. It made Sarah regret that she had never taken the time to know her great-aunt better. A week after Nick was admitted to the hospital, Sarah was finally allowed to visit him. He was sitting up in bed, looking much healthier than he had in the attic. He had been shaved and his hair had been cut. He was wearing a hospital gown, but his eyes were clear and alert. "Sarah," he said, smiling when she entered the room, "I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't found me when you did, I don't know how much longer I could have survived in that chest." "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked, sitting in the chair beside his bed. "Better every day," Nick said. "The doctors say I'll make a full recovery. It's going to take time, but I'll get there." "I have so many questions," Sarah said. "About Eleanor, about what happened, about everything." Nick nodded. "I know, and I'll answer what I can. But first, I want you to know that Eleanor left you something. She left instructions with her lawyer that if anything happened to her, I was to give you this." Nick reached over to the bedside table and pulled out an envelope. It was addressed to Sarah in Eleanor's handwriting. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it and began to read. The letter was long, several pages written in Eleanor's careful script. In it, Eleanor explained everything. How she had known Nick years ago when she was working as a civilian consultant for the FBI, how they had developed a deep friendship, how she had been honored when Nick came to her for help. Eleanor wrote about her regrets in life, about the fact that she had never married or had children, about how helping Nick had given her life a sense of purpose and meaning. She wrote about her pride in Sarah, even though they had barely known each other, and about her hope that Sarah would use the inheritance to build a good life for herself. But most importantly, Eleanor wrote about the importance of loyalty and friendship. She wrote about how true friendship meant being willing to sacrifice for others, to bear burdens that others could not bear, to stand by someone even when it was difficult or dangerous. "She was an extraordinary woman," Nick said, watching Sarah read. "I owe her my life." Sarah finished reading the letter and looked up at Nick, tears streaming down her face. "She left me her entire estate," Sarah said. "Why would she do that?" "Because she wanted you to have the freedom to choose your own path," Nick said. "She wanted you to have the resources to build a life based on your own values, not on financial necessity. And I think she wanted you to understand something important, that the most valuable things in life are not material possessions, but the connections we make with other people and the difference we can make in their lives." Like this video if you believe in the power of friendship and loyalty. Your likes help us reach more people with these incredible true stories. Hit that like button to show your support and help spread this amazing narrative to your friends and family. Over the next several weeks, Sarah learned more details about the investigation that had led to Nick's hiding. The organization he had been investigating was finally brought down, with multiple arrests and convictions resulting from the evidence Nick had gathered. The men and women who had wanted Nick dead were now in federal prison, serving long sentences for their crimes. Nick was eventually released from the hospital and placed in a safe house, while the FBI completed its investigation and prepared for the trials that would follow. Sarah visited him regularly, and they developed a genuine friendship. Nick told her stories about Eleanor, about their years of friendship, about the woman Eleanor had been before Sarah had known her. Sarah learned that Eleanor had been a brilliant woman, fluent in multiple languages, with a background in international relations. She had worked for the government in various capacities throughout her life, though much of her work had been classified. She had never married because she had dedicated her life to her work, to serving her country in ways that few people would ever know about. She was lonely, Nick told Sarah during one of their visits. "I think that's why she was so willing to help me. It gave her a sense of purpose, a way to feel connected to someone. And I think she saw in you the potential for a different kind of life, one where you could balance your own needs with your capacity to help others." Sarah spent months going through Eleanor's papers and possessions, trying to understand the woman her great-aunt had been. She found journals dating back decades, filled with Eleanor's thoughts and observations about the world. She found photographs of Eleanor with various people, at various locations around the world. She found evidence of a life that had been far more interesting and consequential than Sarah had ever imagined. One of the most significant discoveries was a series of letters between Eleanor and Nick, spanning several years. The letters revealed a deep friendship and mutual respect. Eleanor had been Nick's mentor when he first joined the FBI, and she had guided his career, offering advice and support. When Nick had gone undercover, Eleanor had been one of the few people who knew about his operation. The letters also revealed something else. Eleanor had been in love with Nick, though she had never told him. The love was not romantic in the traditional sense, but rather a deep, abiding affection and respect. Eleanor had been willing to hide Nick in her attic because she loved him, because she wanted to protect him, because she could not bear the thought of losing him. As Sarah read these letters, she found herself crying. She was crying for Eleanor, for the loneliness of her life, for the sacrifices she had made, for the love she had carried silently. But she was also crying for herself, for the opportunity she had been given to understand her great-aunt, to honor her memory, and to learn from her example. The trials of the organization's members took place over the course of a year. Nick testified in several of them, his evidence crucial to securing convictions. Sarah attended some of the trials, sitting in the courtroom, watching as justice was served. It was a strange experience, seeing the men and women who had wanted Nick dead, now powerless behind bars. When the final trial concluded, Nick was finally able to move on with his life. The FBI offered him a desk job at headquarters, away from undercover work. Nick accepted, grateful for the opportunity to live a normal life, to have a stable home and regular hours. He bought a small house in the same town where Eleanor's mansion was located. Sarah helped him furnish it, and they became close friends. Nick became a mentor to Sarah, just as Eleanor had been a mentor to him. He helped her understand Eleanor's legacy, helped her make sense of the inheritance, and helped her figure out what she wanted to do with her life. Sarah decided to use part of Eleanor's inheritance to establish a scholarship fund in Eleanor's name, dedicated to supporting young people interested in careers in law enforcement and international relations. She also decided to donate Eleanor's papers and journals to a university, where they could be preserved and studied by historians and researchers. The mansion itself, Sarah decided to keep. She moved into it, renovating it carefully to preserve its historical character while making it more comfortable and livable. She opened parts of it to the public for tours, telling Eleanor's story and the story of the house itself. The mansion became a local landmark, a place where people could learn about Eleanor's remarkable life and about the importance of loyalty, friendship, and sacrifice. Share this video with your friends and family. This incredible story of friendship, loyalty, and redemption deserves to be heard by everyone. Click the share button and spread the word about Sarah and Nick's amazing journey. Help us reach more people with stories that inspire and move us. 5 years after Sarah opened the chest and found Nick Barnes inside, life had settled into a new normal. Nick had fully recovered from his ordeal and had become a respected figure in the FBI, training new agents and consulting on complex investigations. He had written a book about his undercover experience, which had become a bestseller. The book did not mention Eleanor by name, but it was dedicated to her, and anyone who read it carefully could understand the profound impact she had had on his life. Sarah had transformed Eleanor's mansion into a museum and cultural center dedicated to Eleanor's memory and to the history of women in law enforcement and international relations. The museum attracted visitors from around the world, people interested in learning about Eleanor's remarkable life and about the role women had played in shaping American history. Sarah had also pursued her own career, inspired by Eleanor's example. She had gone back to school and earned a degree in international relations. She was now working for a nonprofit organization dedicated to human rights advocacy, using her education and her resources to help people around the world who were suffering from injustice and oppression. Nick and Sarah had become like family to each other. They had dinner together every Sunday, and they spent holidays together. Nick had never married, and Sarah had not found a romantic partner, but they had found in each other a deep and abiding friendship that was perhaps more valuable than romance. One day, Sarah received a package in the mail. It was from the FBI, and it contained Eleanor's personnel file, recently declassified. Sarah sat down and read through it, learning details about Eleanor's career that had been kept secret for decades. Eleanor had worked on some of the most sensitive operations in American history. She had been involved in intelligence gathering during the Cold War, in counterintelligence operations, in diplomatic negotiations that had shaped world events. The file also contained letters of commendation from various directors of the FBI, praising Eleanor's dedication, her intelligence, and her unwavering commitment to her country. One letter, written by a director who had worked with Eleanor for many years, described her as one of the most remarkable women I have ever had the privilege of knowing. Her contributions to this agency and to our nation are immeasurable, and her legacy will endure long after she is gone. Sarah made copies of the file and added them to the museum's collection. She created a new exhibit dedicated to Eleanor's career, telling the story of a woman who had dedicated her life to serving her country, who had sacrificed personal happiness for professional duty. and who had found meaning and purpose in helping others. The exhibit became one of the most popular attractions in the museum. Visitors were moved by Eleanor's story, by the realization that there were people like her, working behind the scenes, making a difference in the world without seeking recognition or reward. On the anniversary of the day Sarah had found Nick in the chest, they held a special event at the museum. Nick gave a speech about Eleanor, about what she had meant to him, about the debt he owed her. He spoke about the importance of loyalty and friendship, about the courage it takes to help someone in danger, about the legacy that Eleanor had left behind. Eleanor taught me that the most important things in life are not material possessions or professional achievements. Nick said, his voice filled with emotion. The most important things are the connections we make with other people, the difference we can make in their lives, and the legacy we leave behind. Eleanor's legacy is not just in the work she did for the FBI, but in the lives she touched, in the people she helped, in the example she set for others to follow. Sarah stood in the audience, listening to Nick speak, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude for Eleanor, for the inheritance she had left, not just in material form, but in the lessons she had taught, the example she had set, and the opportunity she had given Sarah to understand the true meaning of a life well lived. As the event concluded and people mingled in the museum, Sarah found herself standing in front of the chest, the very chest where Nick had been hidden. It was now displayed in a climate-controlled case, preserved as a historical artifact. A plaque beside it told the story of how Sarah had found Nick, how Eleanor had hidden him, and how this extraordinary event had led to the discovery of Eleanor's remarkable legacy. Sarah placed her hand on the glass case, thinking about Eleanor, about the woman who had been willing to sacrifice everything for a friend, who had borne a secret burden alone, who had trusted that someday someone would find the truth and honor her memory. "Thank you, Eleanor," Sarah whispered. "Thank you for everything." Nick came and stood beside her, and together they looked at the chest that had changed both their lives. The chest that had contained not just a man, but a story of friendship, loyalty, sacrifice, and redemption. A story that would be told and retold for generations to come, inspiring others to understand the true meaning of courage, the true value of friendship, and the true legacy that one person can leave behind. The mansion stood as a testament to Eleanor's life, a place where her story would be preserved and shared, where visitors could learn about the woman who had given so much, asked for so little, and left behind a legacy that would endure long after she was gone. And in the attic of that mansion, in a room that had once been filled with Eleanor's secrets, there was now a small memorial, a photograph of Eleanor, a copy of her favorite poem, and a simple inscription, "In memory of Eleanor Mitchell, a woman of courage, loyalty, and unwavering dedication to those she loved." Subscribe to our channel now and turn on notifications so you never miss our next incredible story. We bring you the most compelling narratives about real people, real mysteries, and real transformations. Join our community of thousands of subscribers who love these amazing true stories. Click the subscribe button and the bell icon right now and become part of our growing family. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.